and gentlemen, greetings to you all. My name is Willy Wonka.
So the biggest box office success of the winter holiday season was the film musical Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet and directed by Paul King of the Paddington series. Billed as a prequel to the 1971 Gene Wilder film and inspired by the book by Roald Dahl, Wonka grossed $500 million worldwide, and has met with pretty widespread acclaim for its goofy songs, unabashed silliness, and charming casting. However, I and many others were dissatisfied with Wonka because of one critique which I think anyone who saw it would find objectively valid, which is that while Wonka succeeded as a harmless all-ages kids movie, it failed to deliver on its premise as an origin story. Contrary to the film's tagline, you never really discover how Willy became Wonka. Sure, by the time the movie is over, Chalamet has opened a factory, met an Oompa Loompa, and has sung Pure Imagination, but the audience doesn't really have a sense of how this becomes this.
Please, I beg you, Augustus!
Not too fast! We're gonna sing!
Faster! Hang on.
Suspense is terrible.
He's gonna go this time.
I hope it'll last.
But I suppose that wasn't exactly the point of the picture. Wonka 2023 was meant to show the unexplored sides of the character. His early years of joyful giddiness and naivete before he became a weird and cynical maniac. This is an awkward juxtaposition that is even acknowledged by the film's cast.
Because I had that thought too finishing the script. He's such a joyful character. We don't really get the seeds of his lose that quality. So something happens. I'm curious about it. I don't know if Paul knows. It could be anything.
It could be anything. It could go in so many different directions.
Except here's the thing, Keegan. I actually figured out exactly how Wonka goes insane. Because if you look over Wonka 2023 and logically examine it, you'll realize that Paul King and screenwriter Simon Farnaby haven't set up thousands of different directions it can go. There's only one. And this film, which billed itself as a goofy kids movie, is actually the most dark, deranged, and disturbing Wonka movie of them all. See, despite its sweet exterior, Wonka 2023 is hiding a secret. One that, when revealed, unravels this children's musical into demented, twisted, psychological nightmare. Since I believe the true villain of Wonka 2023 isn't the crooked innkeeper Mrs. Scrubbit, played by Olivia Colman, her partner Bleacher, the corrupt Father Julius, or even the dastardly Chocolate Cartel. No. It's someone so despicable and obvious, you too won't believe you realized it sooner. The real villain of Wonka 2023, the insidious mastermind behind Wonka's candy madness, has to be Lofty, the Oompa Loompa played by Hugh Grant. Now, you're probably thinking, how? How could this silly gag character played by the former lead actor from About a Boy possibly be some sort of diabolical puppet master? Well, Hugh Grant has had a late career turn playing con men in movies. And having him be this sort of stealth villain would actually explain some of the film's odd loose ends. Like, in Wonka 2023, how come Wonka is the one that knows all about making candy, but the Oompa Loompa is the shrewd one doing all of the cunning trickery?
As to pass me that miniature frying pan.
Because if you watch this video all the way to the end, I guarantee you will never think about the 2023 Wonka movie the same way again. So the question for you, viewer, is, are you prepared for a theory so ruinously convincing that it may never leave your mind?
Oh, I don't think I want to hear that.
Oompa Loompa, I'm Rhino Stew, and I have a little theory for you. Oompa Loompa doopity dee, this is... Now, if I'm going to prove this hypothesis beyond a doubt, I ask that you bear with me a little, because we're going to have to get into some nuts and bolts for this to make sense. Traditionally, each iteration of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has taken place in a separate continuity from each other. You had the book, the 1971 Gene Wilder movie, and the 2005 Johnny Depp one. Because the 71 version took a lot of liberties, the fan consensus has been that the book/Burton are their own canon, and the Burton is treated more as a remake of the book. This new movie is clearly positioned to be aligned with the 71 film since it contains Pure Imagination, which is a song only present in that version. And although Chalamet's upbeat characterization has the most in common with the whiz-bang portrayal of Book Wonka, there is one key contradiction that prevents it from actually connecting to him. And that contradiction has to do with one of the most key elements of Wonka lore that this movie has now irrevocably altered. This film completely changes how Wonka met the Oompa Loompas. And if you, like me, saw Wonka 2023 in theaters and had that detail completely gloss over you, allow me to refresh your memory.
Oh, I don't think I want.
So despite the various fluctuations in the adaptations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, there is one moment that happens near verbatim in all three. And it is this exchange between Wonka and the guests about the origin of the Oompa Loompas in the chocolate room.
Loompa Land, there's no such place.
Excuse me, dear
Mr.
lady.
Wonka, I am a teacher of geography.
Oh, well, then you know all about it.
Believe it or not, this bit of dialogue about being a geography teacher is in every Wonka version, except it's actually spoken by a different parent in each one.
Mr. Wonka, cried Mrs. Salt, I am a teacher of geography.
I am a teacher of geography.
Mr. Wonka, I teach high school geography, and I'm here to tell you...
Well, then you'll know all about it and know what a
terrible
country it is.
And this is because the book version is the only one where each kid, sans Charlie, gets to tour the factory with both their parents. The original film changed it to one to better streamline the story. This follows suit in the 2005 version, except that Violet and Mike TV's parents are switched. This means there has yet to be a live-action adaptation where Mrs. Salt or Mr. Gloop get to enter the factory. But what this really means is that the previously canonical Charlie and the Chocolate Factory narrative of Wonka meeting the leader of the Oompa Loompas in a treehouse in Loompa Land over a meal of caterpillars established by Doll is now void. Because in this prequel, Wonka doesn't meet his first Oompa Loompa in Loompa Land. He meets him at his hotel room at Scrubbiton Bleachers.
I am a perfectly respectable size for an Oompa Loompa.
Oompa what now?
And it's not the leader of the Oompa Loompas he encounters. It's this guy named Lofty.
They call me Lofty.
Technically, it's revealed at the end that he has a different name, and in the script he is just called Oompa Loompa. But for the sake of this video, I will address him as Lofty. So Lofty's existence retcons the source material, which jeopardizes his status in the canon and risks him being categorized among the dreaded non-canonical Oompa Loompas, alongside the ones from Epic Movie and Tuffy from Tom and Jerry Wonka. But in the 71 movie, this first encounter is not explicitly stated. So Lofty is canonical, provided you disregard the original book and Burton film, or if you so choose, regard Wonka's recollection of events as testimony and not a pure representation of facts. Which is why, for the sake of this theory, we will not be treating these as definitive sources, but will on occasion reference them as guides. Aside from this conflict, there are several other connections anchoring him to the original Wilder film. Lofty has orange skin, green hair, and white eyebrows, which are traits that genetically align with Wilder Oompa Loompas. He also sings the original Oompa Loompa melodies and rhyme schemes as opposed to the Doll and Burton ones. And he plays the signature Wonka Oompa Loompa tune on his flute. However, Lofty has several anomalous differences from any Oompa Loompa that has been introduced so far. For one thing, he is conversational. He doesn't seem to be a working class or a labor Oompa Loompa, and the reason he has a grudge with Wonka is because
you stole our cocoa beans.
Wonka stole all the cocoa beans in Loompa Land. So Loompa Land's inhospitable climate that is not conducive to cocoa bean growth is something that has been established among all versions. But this whole bean stealing thing is a totally new development for Wonka, who is portrayed in this version as something of an airhead. Now, while there's no official age for William in this film, we do know that the actor playing the child version of Wonka was 11, and that he went on to spend 7 years traveling the globe studying chocolate, and that this cocoa bean theft happened 3 years before he landed. Meaning we can trace Wonka's final age to be anywhere from 18 to 22, and that this bean theft occurred between ages 15 to 19. Which means Wonka was a teenager and ironically makes him the first true victim of a vengeful Oompa Loompa song. A song so ruinously catchy that it may never
leave your mind.
Oh, I don't think...
So we've now concluded that this prequel is indeed functional, provided you go directly to Wilder and ignore the books. But it does raise two important questions. Who exactly is Lofty? And where the hell did he go? Lofty is a weird character in the prequel, and despite his star billing and stunt casting, is a fairly minor character who shows up halfway through the film and doesn't do much for the plot. The first mention of his existence happens at around the 37-minute mark, when Wonka describes a
little orange man.
What?
The little orange man. I didn't tell you about him? About yay high. Comes in the dead of the night and he steals all my chocolate.
Now, an amateur theorist who hasn't seen the film may say, does that make him a figment of Wonka's imagination like Tyler Durden? Except that's exactly what Noodle says.
What other explanation is there?
I don't know. That you go to sleep, dream about little green man, and while you're dreaming, stuff your face with chocolate.
So let's up our game here a bit. Because this film now dramatizes a vital moment in the Wilder canon lore, and it's his first encounter with an Oompa Loompa.
An Oompa what now?
Now, although introduced as a cocoa bean guard, this position may in fact be part-time or voluntary, and he can somehow afford to be exiled in a tiny Loompa-sized speedboat. He has luxurious accommodations. He is far wealthier than any Oompa Loompa we've seen in any other version, and judging by his cunning and negotiating ability,
I'm not going to let you out of my sight, Willy Wonka. Not till you've paid your debt.
There is a high possibility that Lofty may in fact be an Oompa Loompa financial broker, who is set to get his debt paid back,
1,000-fold.
which is a perfect complement to Wonka as a partner, since Wonka is clearly a rube with a huge lack of financial acumen. He even makes the classic Shark Tank mistake of trying to get into retail first instead of distribution.
And there's a cost to set that up.
Whereas Lofty demonstrates the most important aspect of any successful boss, getting people to do his work for him. This gets into one of the subtler character dynamics in the prequel. Wonka wants to be a magician, but since he grew up isolated on a boat with his mother, he can do illusions, but he doesn't really know people or his audience. Lofty is the opposite.
Please don't tell me you're going to go through with this ridiculous deal.
I have to.
You should stand up to those bullies. Give them the old 1-2.
He's shrewd and knows people and knows how to get what he wants.
You steal from an Oompa Loompa, we take back 1,000-fold.
Making him ideal for the cutthroat world of mergers and acquisitions. And unlike Wonka, who barely gets across the whole film, Lofty can have a, pardon my phrase, short temper, and does seem to almost embody Wonka's shadow.
You should stand up to those bullies. Give them the old 1-2. That's what an Oompa Loompa would do.
In truth, there's not too much we can deduce about this character, but we can be certain of two things. He likes chocolate, and out of everyone introduced in the so-called prequel, he's the only one left in Wonka's life at the end, because everyone else is sung off in the ending section in the credits. And that fact is what changes everything. For those of you who didn't watch it, here is a brief summary of the events of Wonka 2023. After 7 years of studying chocolate, a young Willy Wonka lands in the big city to pursue his and his mother's dream of opening a chocolate shop at a high-end food market called the Gallery Gourmet. The chocolate section of the gallery is overseen by 3 different rival chocolatiers, Prodno's, Fickelgruber, and Slugworth, names that should be familiar to fans of the story as they have appeared in various retellings of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Wonka greets them and demonstrates his new confection, an insect-based candy that makes the consumer fly called Hover Chalks. After getting kicked out of the Gallery Gourmet, Wonka learns that the 3 are in fact running an illegal chocolate cartel, watering down their inventory and bribing officials in order to maintain their control on the city's chocolate supply. Wonka gets tricked and forced to work in a fraudulent inn/laundromat and teams up with his fellow trapped residents and new friend Noodle, who decide to start an underground chocolate network as a means to raise funds to escape. After a series of ups and downs, Wonka infiltrates the cartel's headquarters to find evidence of their corruption, and discovers that Noodle is actually the true heir to the Slugworth fortune, only to get caught and left to drown in a giant vat of chocolate. Wonka and Noodle are then rescued by...
Orange Man! Look! What? The little orange man!
Thank you, little orange man! Thank you!
After escaping, Wonka hands the ledger over to the authorities, thwarting the chocolate cartel for good, reuniting Noodle with her long-lost mother, and then invites Lofty to come work with him as a taste tester in his newly opened factory. Now, although this may seem like a hunky-dory happy ending, it sets up a massive plot hole, which is, if Slugworth and the chocolate cartel get arrested, who is responsible for making Wonka paranoid and insane? Since the book and Wilder movie established that what made Wonka withdraw from the world were the spies trying to steal his chocolate.
All the other chocolate makers in the world were sending in spies, dressed as workers to steal Mr. Wonka's secret recipes, especially Slugworth. Oh, that Slugworth, he was the worst.
Who have now been publicly caught, arrested, and are behind bars. And if they're really going to just alter the story this much with no solid way to connect to the original, then that would make this movie a prequel reboot, or preboot. But clearly, Warner Brothers would never hide the fact that this film was just a reboot, because they already had a hard enough time hiding that this was a musical. And it would look really bad from a publicity point for them to admit that. So if it's not a reboot, this has to lead directly to this. But it can't, because the cartel got arrested. And you could say, well, they probably just bribed their way out and reestablished themselves after their sentencing. Except they couldn't, because there's no way Charlie Bucket wouldn't know that that man isn't actually Arthur Slugworth. And no, it's not because of race recasting, it's because this Arthur Slugworth and that Arthur Slugworth aren't the same person. This Slugworth is actually...
Charlie, meet Mr. Wilkinson. Pleasure.
Slugworth!
No, that's not Slugworth. He works for me.
Mr. Wilkinson, a spy that will be hired by Wonka to pretend to be Slugworth, who was just used as a way to test Charlie Bucket to see if he was worthy of inheriting the factory. And you could say, well, this could just be a case of, in this universe, this Slugworth could be a body double of the real one. But then I tell you to slow down because you're getting into John Woo face-off territory. There is a much simpler explanation for all of this. And it's that after the movie, Wonka Chocolate takes control of the Slugworth Corporation, and indeed, the entire chocolate cartel.
Hey, Noodle!
At the end of Wonka 2023, Slugworth, Prodnos, and Fickelgruber fly off into the sunset. It's assumed that the cartel must regroup in order to be present in the original film, but it makes far more sense to have Wonka's corporate arm acquire Slugworth Sweets and the rest of the cartel. This means installing a new puppet Slugworth at the head of the company. So once Arthur Slugworth I is removed, a new CEO is installed, who for legal reasons is also named Arthur Slugworth. And if you think having two characters both named Arthur Slugworth despite no familial relationship is weird, remember, this is a franchise that now has things as ridiculous as giraffe milk macaroons and characters named Zebedee.
Belonged to my brother, Zebedee.
And to reiterate, he's not actually Mr. Slugworth, he's Mr. Wilkinson, and the whole point of placing him there is to operate as shell companies and control the entire chocolate market while circumventing anti-competitive clauses. Which means Wonka Chocolate actually owns all of these brands and maintains a shadow monopoly on the entire candy industry. And that plan is in fact pure genius, which means Wonka couldn't have been the one to come up with that. Because although the Wonka we meet in the prequel film is a whiz of chocolate and contraptions, he has terrible business sense and is awful with money. The only one shrewd enough to come up with this plan is Lofty, and if Lofty is the one making all of the business and financial decisions, this raises a question that changes everything. Now, fair warning, this is a checkpoint from when there's no turning back, where we open ideas that will not just forever alter your perceptions of Wonka 2023, but also the classic 1971 Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And if you want to just leave that movie untainted the way it is, I'd stop now. But if you actually want this movie to make sense as a prequel, all you have to do is entertain a simple question. Because this movie actually brings a new possibility that can change the entire history of Wonka theorizing. And that question is...
Snozberries! Who ever heard of a snozberry?
We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
One of the most defining traits about Wonka is his enigmatic genius, both through his candy and irreproachable slyness. And while this new film shows him as an illiterate klutz, it presents as a shocking rhetorical possibility. What if Wonka never stopped being a rube? What if this suave mercurial trickster is actually acting as a puppet with no will of his own? A broken shell of a man taking orders from an unseen force, and all of these quirks are the result of some sort of Theon Greyjoy-like brainwashing. A fool playing the part of a genius. This explains his erratic behavior and mood shifts. Just like Mr. Wilkinson, Wonka is also just an act. Someone who seems to be the man behind the curtain, but is in fact just another pawn, and nothing he says can be taken as truth. Take for example, his whole spiel about Loompa Land.
Nothing but desolate wastes and fierce beasts. So I said, come and live with me in peace and safety. Away from all the wang-doodles and hornswogglers and snozwangers and rotten, vermicious knids.
This moment is interesting because you could take Wonka's word for it and assume that the snozwangers and vermicious knids he's referring to are real, since they appear in the Great Glass Elevator. But honestly, after watching the 2023 film, I'm actually starting to think that he's lying. Because it's been over 50 years since the first movie, and we have still yet to see one on screen. So, in this film continuity, I don't think vermicious knids exist. In fact, Wonka's description of Loompa Land has nothing but
desolate wastes and fierce beasts.
Completely contradicts the tropical setting we see in the film. As Lofty even says,
Yeah, Loompa Land is both luscious and green.
Why? Why is Wonka lying about Loompa Land? And most importantly, why would he leave out the detail about the Oompa Loompa who saved his life? What is he trying to hide? At some point, Willy Wonka used human labor and then sealed the factory off, meaning nobody ever goes in and nobody ever comes out. The factory then reopens, but the gates are locked, and it's revealed during its first private tour that the laborers are these little orange men called
Oompa Loompas.
Except we've now established that Wonka was aware of the Oompa Loompas prior to him opening the factory. So his offer to
come and live with me in peace and safety
doesn't make sense because he hadn't built it yet. We see in the prequel that the Chocolate River and Candy Garden were part of the original factory blueprint, and its existence was not known to the outside world, meaning Wonka had to have built a fake front to the factory and hired workers only to fire them under the pretense of factory leaks to maintain the illusion of the existence of the chocolate cartel. The Oompa Loompas were making chocolate in the factory the whole time, because Lofty realized that partnering with Wonka would strategically position the cocoa bean deprived Loompas in charge of the entire world's supply of chocolate. Because here's the real twist that this prequel reveals: the Oompa Loompas never actually left Loompa Land. Sure, Wonka says all the Oompa Loompas now live in his factory.
And so, in the greatest of secrecy, I transported the entire population of Oompa Loompas to my factory here.
But this is all his claim. Clearly, this prequel establishes Loompa Land as its own autonomous civilization with functioning speedboats, traveling luggage, and a governing body similar to that of the Holy Say. The only thing they don't have is their favorite thing: chocolate. Why would they needlessly give up living in dear Loompa Land when the real answer is so obvious you won't believe you didn't think of it sooner? What if the real point of the factory was to build a secret chocolate distribution line direct to Loompa Land? Why transfer the whole population when clearly the smart thing to do is have a remote group of Loompas reside and work in the factory and send products direct to their homeland? This created the need for secrecy and maintaining an all Oompa Loompa workforce, because if there were humans working at the factory, they would get suspicious, wondering where a vast majority of their chocolate supply is going. Hence why fellow Scrub at Laundromat victim and former Slugworth accountant Abacus Crunch is sent home and not hired to work at the factory because he would be a total snitch. That's right, capitalism is just a red herring. For the past 50 years, we've been given the runaround. The Oompa Loompas aren't slaves. They're exactly where they want to be. They don't serve us. Our mindless consumerism is actually serving them.
The way that a cow does.
Because Wonka isn't controlling the Oompa Loompas. An Oompa Loompa is controlling Wonka. And this is all part of Lofty's master plan.
So goes a good deed in a weary world.
At the end of the 2023 prequel, Wonka says,
"Thank you for saving my life."
And in doing so, Lofty the Oompa Loompa realizes he simultaneously has a genius and a fool under his thumb and the opportunity of a lifetime. Now, all he has to do in order to make himself the ruler of Loompa Land and pay back all those who doubted him is build the chocolate pipeline and take control of the operation. He wouldn't even have to do any of the work. He just has to get that chocolate-making sap to do all the heavy lifting. And then, once he looks like he's about to burn out, he'd just have to replace him with someone equally as enthusiastic, witless, and obedient. Hence the Wonka sweepstake contest, gobstopper trial, and why Charlie Bucket, a randomly selected child with no candy-making acumen whatsoever, is chosen to be the ideal successor. But Wonka is an idealist, and beholden to his principles. He wants to share his chocolate with the world, and wouldn't cooperate in such unscrupulous tactics. Which means, in order for this plan to work, he would have to break him. And I think I know exactly how it happened.
Lofty, you're really going to return home? But the factory is almost ready to open, and I have so much time and so little to—
Yes, William, I am well aware. But you know that little logistics stumbling block we've been running into? Well, my boys managed to figure out a direct passageway from the nerve center to the inventing room. Do you like it? We've been calling it the Wonkatania.
Oh, what a marvelous vessel! Lofty, you've outdone yourself.
How would you like to be a passenger on her maiden voyage?
Why, I would be scrum-diddly-eyed. Are we ready? Set? Yes? Good?
On we go.
Wow, gosh, I never thought I would live to see this. Paddling my own boat down my own chocolate river. Oh, it's almost like...
A dream? Can't blame you. You were raised on a boat, weren't you, Wonka?
Yeah, just my mother and me, in a little world of our own.
Just the two of you?
If only she could still be here, to see me finally open my factory and share my chocolate with the world.
About that, I'm afraid there have been some complications with the opening.
Complications?
Perhaps we should discuss them over some silver linings? You know, those chocolates you make that always help you see a ray of hope beyond the shadow of despair.
Absolutely. Say, that tunnel up ahead looks dark.
We're working on getting some lights installed.
What's this all about, Lofty?
Have you reconsidered my proposal for the Loompa Land pipeline project? You've been awfully silent on the matter. Almost like you wouldn't comply.
You know I can't do it. This factory could provide jobs for so many people. I can't just close it off and hire Oompa Loompas. That would be...
Immoral? Reprehensible? Wonka, it would be the best decision you made in your life.
But I want to share my chocolate with the world, not just give half of it to a bunch of Oompa Loompas.
With our help, you could make enough chocolate to feed the world and Loompa Land 4 times over.
But if we start using Oompa Loompas and Slugworth finds out...
Slugworth won't be finding out. Nor the rest of the cartel.
How do you know that?
Well, let's say that each of them had an unfortunate accident. In which they died.
Lofty, you didn't.
I have already made the arrangements to acquire control of Prodnose, Fickelgruber, and Slugworth Incorporated. Why have competition when you can be the competition? You can even employ humans in those branches to work and sell off a more inferior product. Now, if you sign off on the pipeline...
You murdered them. I'll tell...
Don't act so naive, Wonka. It's not like your hands are clean either.
What are you talking about?
Still in denial. Maybe you blocked it out. Lord knows how many whiskey fudges you've had to down to wipe that all away.
You're talking nonsense.
My men found the riverboat.
Huh?
We found the boat. Made sense for you to sink the thing, since you were still a child and couldn't manage to lift her out. She was still inside, you know. Nothing but waterlogged bones. But we did manage to find something interesting next to her body.
But she fell ill.
She fell ill, suddenly, without telling you her secret? Why? Was it to torture you for years? Or was it to spare you from the truth?
No.
Oompa Loompa doopity-doo. I've got a little puzzle for you. Oompa Loompa doopity-dee. If you are wise, you will listen to me. How do you hide from something you cannot face when you've made mistakes that you'd rather erase? How did it feel when you did discover that it was you who killed your...
This has to be the best chocolate in the world.
Oh, don't know about that. They say that the very best comes from a place called the Gallery Gourmet.
Easily the biggest heartstring tugger of the 2023 film is Sally Hawkins as Mama Wonka.
As it so happens, I do know a little secret that even those fancy pants don't.
Who's Irish for some reason and is only present in flashbacks and hallucinations. He is literally haunted by her, and this film establishes that it's her unexpected passing that fuels Wonka's motivation to succeed.
My mom once promised that when I shared chocolate with the world, she'd be right there beside me. I always hoped she'd somehow keep that promise. She might even tell me her secret.
but glosses over the whole how she died part. We never see Mama Wonka fall ill.
Soon after, she fell sick. And before I knew it, all I had left was her bar of chocolate.
And we assume as the audience that it was some kind of fever or sickness of that nature. But flipping this moment on its head not only solves one of the key future plot points, but changes the tone of the movie completely, and opens up Wonka to the dark tragedy it can be.
Poison my child! I didn't poison them.
Because this madness and remorse has to have a root. And if it isn't the chocolate cartel, it has to be that as a child, Wonka accidentally made a candy that killed his mother. And that's why they all go on a riverboat. Probably because he tried to make a jelly from berries by the side of the river, and due to his dyslexia, couldn't understand the recipe, and used poison berries instead of boysenberries. And she couldn't bear to tell him, because that would ruin his dream.
And when you do share chocolate with the world, I'll be right there beside you.
And with that one change, this stops being a cutesy movie about a whimsical himbo escaping a laundromat, but a twisted tale of denial and a tormented soul who uses sweetness, daydreams, and musical numbers as a way to hide from his innermost demons.
Is that all it is? Just a dream?
Every Wonka is cursed to have some form of darkness, and it's not because of some notions of good or evil. It's because Willie was the first careless child, the one who should have paid attention before it was too late.
No! That's not true! Lofty, stop! Stop!
I'm afraid Oompa Loompas don't negotiate.
But...
Look at the silver linings, Wonka. You did become a better chocolatier. The best in the world, even. And all because the most important candy you ever made was the one that made your mother disappear. There we are. Now sign. I say, Wonka, do you know what happened to the little orange man who suddenly got everything he always wanted? He lived happily ever after.
And that's the evil Hugh Grant Oompa Loompa theory, folks. I hope you enjoyed that one. I wanted to make this video because, oh boy, all those plot holes were bothering me, and now Wonka works as a prequel. So there you go, Mr. Key. Consider Wonka solved. And if you like that video, just remember to share it with the hashtag Oompa Loompa theory, because
Damn, Hugh Grant got that Oompa Loompa
theory. This was actually the first theory on my channel in 4 years, after the Toy Story 3-eyed alien death cult theory. And I have some more announcements and theory content planned for this year. So if you want to be notified of any of those, click the subscribe button or head over to my newly opened Patreon. People have been asking me for a while to make a Patreon to help support the channel. There are no paid tiers yet. It's all free, but it's a better way to stay notified of what the channel is up to than solely through the YouTube algorithm. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.